Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
On the show with us today, Oscar Höglund. He is the co-founder and CEO of Epidemic Sound. They're a music tech company on a mission to soundtrack the world. Since its inception in 2009, Oscar has led Epidemic Sound's journey to become one of the market leaders of restriction-free music for storytellers and is responsible for the company's global expansion strategy. Oscar, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Bob.
Well, one question we always ask everybody when they're on the show is, how did they get involved in the music business? Were you a musician initially, or were you a tech guy? How did this all start before Epidemic Sound got started?
So I've always been into music, but unfortunately, I'm one of those people who was born with ambition in that area, but zero talent. So I was fortunate enough to understand that early on. I've been into poetry my entire life, and I've come to understand that most people, when they hear music, I think 90% only listen to the music, but then there's 10% of us who can listen to the text, and immediately, basically, I hear a song maybe once or twice, and then I know it. So words very much speak to me. And so I've always been drawn to music. I've always wanted to work close to it, with it, but I've had no ambition to actually perform it. I've sung once to my wife, and she asked me kindly but firmly, please don't ever do that again. And there we are.
Wow. So you started this company. What was the basis for creating it?
So time-wise, let's go back maybe 12 years in time, because that's the inception of Epidemic. And I think that, like a lot of companies and a lot of ideas, it was born from equal parts frustration, but also parts opportunity. So back then I found myself in Sweden. I was working at a TV production company, and I was fortunate enough to play a small part in putting great TV shows out that traveled across the world. So we did The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, to give an example of a show that I think many of your listeners might be familiar with.
Right.
There's American versions and Swedish versions, and we played parts in both of them. But in that world, we stumbled upon two problems that we felt needed solving. And so on the one hand, we had these storytellers, TV creators, ad creators, but also we saw that the internet was shifting as well. And story creators, they were in a position where adding music to their shows was quite cumbersome. Something that we felt it ought to be the pinnacle, the most fun part of creating a piece of content is when you get to add music, because it's the equivalent of adding flavor and taste to food. It's what makes content memorable and desirable, and it's what makes you fall in love with something. But adding music was very difficult. It was difficult to find music because the processes and the structures were difficult. There were hard drives with terabytes of music, and there were folders, and it was a nightmare to find what you were looking for. And then reporting it and clearing it, it was very difficult. And to make matters even more complicated, we moved from an analog linear world where people would publish something on national television, say, and stuff started ending up on the internet, where it immediately got published all across the world. And rights got murky, and clearance got difficult, and payment and process and follow-up. We felt that this needs solving. It should be fun to add music to content. That should be the best part that everyone should look forward to. That was one problem that we wanted to solve for. And the second one was more predominantly aimed at music creators. We were 5 people who founded Epidemic. 3 of them were very accomplished, both music producers and music creators. And we were wildly frustrated that it was so difficult for musicians to support themselves. I would argue that there was a royalty romanticism in the industry where Nobody was getting paid up front, but they were getting promised this pot of gold. There might be royalty at the end of the rainbow. But people were neglecting to tell the creators that 99% unfortunately don't see royalty.
Right.
And you end up not getting paid for your work. And we felt that, wouldn't it be amazing if we, in some way, shape, or form, could help create a music industry where musicians and creators actually made, I think the term we used was shitloads of money, where we optimized for artists. So rather than making sure that there were middlemen, that there were PROs and neighboring rights or publishers or record labels, how about if somebody stood up and said, so clearly, we want to see if we can optimize for music creators. So those were the two ambitions that we had. Creating a situation where it was easy and fun to add music to content, and creating a new version of the music industry where we optimize for the artists rather than the middlemen. And we were quite bold in our ambitions. So that was the starting point. These were the two problems that we set out to solve.
Did you solve them?
I'll let somebody else be the judge of that.
Okay.
But my personal opinion is that very much so. Because we find ourselves 12 years down the line. We've built this company where we, over the years, have been able to work with thousands of music creators, where we've created a catalog of over 35,000 different tracks. We've become one of the biggest music providers to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram in the world. We have hundreds of thousands of storytellers and the most prolific content creators of our time who use our music, so much so that our music is heard, I think it's about 2 billion times every single day on YouTube alone. There's a piece of content being played with music from Epidemic. And what we're particularly proud about is that we built an ecosystem where musicians can support themselves. We're seeing hundreds and hundreds of musicians on a monthly basis, and they're earning in the excess. I think the average music creator that works with us earns about $35,000 per year. And I think the average in the US is $25,000. Our top earners obviously make much more.
What is the big discrepancy there?
So in order to answer that, I think that I'd love to dive down and tell you a little bit more about how Epidemic works. What we opted for is that 12 years ago, we placed a big contrarian bet, which sort of moved in the opposite direction of where the music industry was going. Because 12 years ago, the name of the game was that everyone wanted to hold on to their rights. And that was the trend, and that's where the industry was moving.
Right.
We sat down and we looked at that, and we tried to ask ourselves, yes, but why is everyone saying you need to own the rights to your content? And our interpretation, our belief was that, well, the reason you want to do that is because there's an understanding that if you control your rights, there's a greater likelihood that your content can travel and that you can generate revenue. And we challenged that conception because we said that, well, we think that we could achieve those two outcomes by doing the opposite. If we reach out to musicians and commission tracks for them, and where we acquire the rights, we could acquire a lot of music, we could pay up front, and in that process, if we don't invite middlemen, if we don't invite PROs and labels and publishers, and we don't split all the rights, but we hold the rights in one position, we think that that would be an optimal starting point for trying then to build a business around this so that we can find many storytellers who would be interested in subscribing on an ongoing basis, so paying a monthly fee to get access to that repertoire music. And over time, as that grows, there's going to be more music, so we can buy more music and we can acquire more music and we create more distribution. And we scaled this idea so much so to the point that what we started to see was that not only were we able to pay our musicians upfront for the music that we were commissioning, the music was then being played at such an extent all across the world, all across the internet, all across television, that viewers were seeing this music, they were hearing this music, and they were falling in love with this music. And so they were reaching out through forums and through online and through YouTube, and they were saying that this track is amazing. I'd love to listen to this track on Spotify or on Apple or on Deezer. And so that inspired us to say, okay, let's add the second part to our business. So we're paying up front for tracks, but we're creating all this marketing in the material being used, and it's drawing attention to the artist, which is exactly what we want. So we then said, let's put all of our music on the music streaming platforms as well. So let's put it on Spotify and Deezer and Apple, and I think we're up at 52 different DSPs, but let's do it differently. And so we looked at what does typically an artist make in terms of payouts from these platforms. And we found out that on average, I'm not going to single anyone out, but on average, the majority of the royalty payouts tended to end up with the record labels. Part of it ended up with the publishers, and less so with the actual artists and the actual songwriters. And we took issue with that, and we said, that's not the music industry we want to create. That's not a legacy we want to be part of. So we said that on top of paying upfront and on top of all this distribution and marketing, we're going to put music on these streaming platforms. We're going to collect the royalty, which is why we don't use the term royalty-free for our music, because we definitely believe in royalty. We say restriction-free because we don't think that music wants to be locked in and taken down. And we collect that royalty and we split that 50-50 with the music creators. And so that was part 2 of our business model. So always pay up front. We pay between $1,000 and $3,000 per track that we commission. And then we put that in the catalog. It hopefully gets used by thousands of storytellers who have hundreds of millions of viewers on that content, fall in love with the content, go to a streaming platform of their choice, listen to that music. That generates even more royalty, which we then split with the music creators. So we have this 2-pronged approach where there are no middlemen, there's no cutoff, there's no leakage, there aren't reporting issues, there aren't publishers, record labels, PROs, neighboring rights organization, all having a piece of the pie. It's just us, music creators, and in this case, the platforms. So we can collect revenue and we split it 50-50. And that's why we can get to a different point.
Wow. We're going to take a break, get a word in for one of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Oscar Högland, who's the co-founder and CEO of Epidemic Sound.
Hello, this is Christopher Caliendo, the founder of the Tutti Academy and Caliendo World Music Publishing, and I have the pleasure of speaking to Bob Bender on the Business Side of Music podcast.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives, whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook. 101 ways to help you improve your chances of success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena. And believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio with us today, Oscar Högland, who is the co-founder and CEO of Epidemic Sound. And let's actually say he's not physically sitting in the studio with us today because he's across the pond, as we sometimes say, in Stockholm, Sweden. Your company has been around now for 11, 12 years.
Yep.
And you've grown because obviously during the break we talked about you have, about 400 plus employees now?
Correct.
You have offices all over.
Yes, we have offices all over the world. The only place where we have more than one office is the US. So we have a large office in New York, we have a large office in LA, and then we also have people in Nashville.
You are providing a service that it seems, at least from the guests that we've had on the show in the past, and I would really have to think hard or brainstorm, you're really creating something that I just don't remember talking about in the past. And a couple things there is, first of all, I love the whole idea of the 50-50 approach in the streaming revenue and providing a platform for these content creators, these music creators, that they're not having to jump through what sounds like a lot of hoops and dealing with different, as you said before, PROs, publishing companies, other entities don't want a slice of the pie. It literally comes down to just you and them.
Yes, correct.
So with that being said, one of the things I want to jump into is, because obviously what you're doing is you've taken the time to put the creators first so they can help drive and innovate this music industry that we're all a part of. When they're putting together the music to pitch to you, is this a complete song? Is it just segments? Are you looking for lyric-based content or instrumental-based content? How is that music derived? What is it you're looking for?
Yeah. So the quick answer, Bob, is yes to all of the above. But let me break it down a little bit. So the way that we work is following. In any given month, we're working with hundreds of talented music creators, songwriters, artists, lyricists, top liners. Everyone is welcome because we're a wide church and we're looking for diversity because our ambition is we're looking to soundtrack the internet. That's the bigger picture.
I love that. Looking to soundtrack the internet. That's beautiful.
We passionately feel that I have 3 kids. In 20, 30 years from now, I'd love to think that I'm walking down the street in downtown Stockholm. There are polar bears everywhere because it's friggin' freezing. And I'm talking with my grandkids. And one of them is going to look up at me and they're going to go, "Granddad, is it fair to say that your generation invented the internet?" And there's going to be a big old smile on my face. And I'm going to go, "Yes, honey, I guess that is true. I normally don't think about it that way, but yeah, we did." And I like to think that she's going to go, "That's amazing," because that's your generation's biggest collective achievement. It's what you're remembered for. It was the fundament for your society. It's what we base all of our lives on. It's how we communicate. It's how we interact. It's how we've made the world a better place. Aren't you proud? And I'm going to go, "Hell yes." And then we're going to skip down the street, and then she's going to stop in her tracks, and she's going to look at me, and she's going to go, "But Granddad, you need to remind me. What was your contribution to your generation's biggest collective achievement? Because please, please tell me that you in some small way participated." And I'm going to be all nervous first and sweaty. It's an existential question. It's important to get this right. But then there's going to be a big old smile on my face and I'm going to lean in and I'm going to say that, you know what? I got to play a small part in soundtracking the internet. Together with a group of exceptional people, I got to bring creativity and music front and center in our generation's biggest achievement. In that process, I like to think that we were able to play a small part in recalibrating the music industry, in sort of democratizing access to music and who gets to call themselves an artist and how you get distributed, and just opening up the internet and making it a much more beautiful place. Now, let me tell you some crazy stories about how that all played out. So that's the dream picture behind what we want to achieve. And so going back to your question, we're looking for all kinds of music, because if the internet is a place where there are tens of thousands or just thousands of artists, that's going to be a very depressing discussion to have with my grandkids in a couple of decades from now, because we want to open up so that everyone has the chance. We think that the internet wants to sound wildly different. We're not looking to create something which levitates towards a norm. We don't want hits. We want the opposite, because people have distinct stories, they have distinct content, and the internet needs to be a wildly different, fully populated place in order for us to achieve. So off the back of that, we are constantly looking for people who have definite quirks, passion, talent, skills. If you're different, bring it. That's what we're fundamentally saying. That doesn't mean that we are, I think, we're very diligent, and so there's an order to our chaos, and so we structure the music. We have tons of information nowadays. Having listened for a decade and playing a big part, we understand what the internet currently sounds like, and we're constantly picking up signals. We're seeing what people are looking for, what they're searching, what they're downloading, what they're finding, but more interesting, what they're not finding. They're searching for stuff in our product, in our player, and when they're coming up short, that's an immediate signal to us where we go, that's interesting. People are looking for this, but they're not downloading stuff. Let's produce more. Let's see what we can do. So we accumulate wealth of data, and then we serve that back to the music industry that we work with. And we say that people are looking for this. Does any of this give you inspiration? They're looking for these kind of instruments, this kind of text, these songs. This is happening. The world is feeling sad. We're in pandemic mode. So people are looking for comfort food, but in a musical form. We don't have that. Let's see if we can find people who can help us create it. So it's a constant ongoing dialogue with our ear towards the internet. What does it sound like? what is the data telling us, and then we relay that information back to all the musicians and the creators. And we don't demand that anyone creates according to those briefs, but we do put that out there and say, this is our starting point. And then people who get inspired, people who want to do stuff around that, then we sort of interact with them and we help them. We sort of, this is what they're doing. That sounds amazing. Have you thought about this? So there's a huge element of us A&Ring and helping them and giving them inspiration or tips or feedback or connecting them with other artists who we think can add to what they're creating. And then together we co-create and we put it out to the world, and then we get immediate feedback and we see what works. So that's how it comes together.
When you accumulate this data, a couple things. Are you finding holes that need to be filled? Is there a certain list of content creators you go to say, hey, we have found this void. This is what needs to be created or why it needs to be created. So the data, how it's accumulated, and how do you suss all that out to fill those pockets that need to be filled?
So the short answer is yes, that's very much what we do, but that's not entirely what we do. So I would argue that let's stick with the 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time, we're constantly listening, we're accumulating data, insights, trends. We see that on the DSPs, what gets picked up on different playlists, what gets liked, what gets dropped from different playlists. That's constantly signals that inform us. So that's one part of it. Then we see what happens in television. So watermarking, audio marks, we can see what the world sounds like. And we see the same happening on the internet as well. We have millions of storytellers who use the music on a constant basis. Hence, we have a lot of noise and a lot of signals. And through that, we can create an understanding of what people are looking for. So that's the majority. 20%, though, is the reverse. So it's people who have ideas where they're saying, like, look, nobody's asking for this, but this is what I'm feeling. This is what we're putting out. So people also send us stuff which they say that this is amazing. And a lot of the times we go, hell yes, that is absolutely amazing. We're going to go with this. Nobody's asking for it, but that's the beauty of music. There's a place inside of us. There doesn't always have to be a void in the data that tells us to do something, because we're humans. So it might as well just be a void inside of some people who work with our musicians saying that this is amazing. Let's put it out and see what happens. So it's this constant dance, if you will, between, I'd almost try and characterize it as IP, in the sense that music is intellectual property, but so too is engineering and data. That's also intellectual property. And historically, there's almost been this friction and divide that tech and music can't play nice.
Right.
We've tried to open that up and see it differently and say that this is both IP, and they can inform and enhance and co-create with each other. So that's what we're trying to create.
Is the technical side of what we're talking about here, the tech world, are they starting, I don't know how to word this, so let me just put it this way. Are they understanding this, the kind of the synchronicity that's needed, and are they willing to play nice in order to get this put together to where it is this creative world for all concerned?
So my answer to that is definitely yes, but I say so from a position of being humble, because I'm the first to acknowledge that historically, when the music industry and the tech industry have tried to come together, there are legacy issues at hand. There are different ways of viewing the world, how you create value, how you scale. And in order to try and co-create and collaborate, it's difficult because history dictates what different routes you have at your disposal. We had a luxury when we kicked things off because we're a young company and we very much started out without a legacy. So we had a clean sheet of paper and we could build logic, principles, a way of working where we fundamentally could tie the music industry and technology together in a fruitful way for both parties. So that's been a great enabler for us. Are we totally without restraints? Definitely not. So a couple of examples include, we have a very hard time working with music creators who are currently parts or registered with PROs for one simple reason. If you look at your PRO agreement, typically it says, if you sign this piece of paper, all music that you produce has to be managed through a performance rights organization. You're effectively stripped of your own ability to sell music to anyone else. for that simple reason, we can't work with music creators who are signed to PROs because their current agreements don't allow for it. So I just want to distinguish that because that's an important part as an example. I'm not saying that PROs are to blame. I'm not sort of looking to point a finger, but I'm simply stating that we're not totally immune to history. And so what ends up happening is that a lot of people say that they leave a PRO either indefinitely or for a period of time, and they write for us, we pay them up front, generate royalty, and then if they want to, they can jump back. Typically, though, that's not the case, because once they've tried writing for us and they get the distribution, they get colleagues, they get the new digital context, which works with them as opposed to against them, they don't really want to go back.
What style of music seems to be the most in demand these days? Is there any one thing? I mean, obviously, here in the United States, and especially when we talk about Nashville or maybe Austin, Texas, country music. I mean, that's just it. Or Americana music. When you get into Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or Miami, it can go from dance music to pop to rock to Latin, exactly, or hip hop. Or are you confined by any one style or genre of music, or can it is it just kind of wide open doors when it comes to that?
So I think that currently we serve north of 300 different genres. And there's an interesting dynamic at play here, because typically in the traditional music industry, music that gets picked up and that gets rewarded is stuff that's popular, because there's a notion of people wanting to understand what's popular and sharing that relationship with that music with multiple other individuals. We come at it from the exact opposite point of view, because typically our music is used in a context, there's a piece of content. Let's, for argument's sake, say that I made a documentary about my grandmother. She was an outstanding individual and she was unique. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for music that nobody has ever heard before.
Right.
Because I want to hear something that does her justice. So the main use case of our platform, and when people come to Epidemic, is the opposite of when people want to hear popular music. So people are looking for quirky, they're looking for different, hence we're very wide in what we're looking for. That said, I would argue that everything is relevant, but if there's a trend now, and it's kind of intuitive when you think about it, the world is sad right now. And what I mean by that is, back in the 1920s, they were called the Roaring Twenties, and I've been told that it was because there was the Spanish flu in 1917 and 1918, which was a very dark period of time. And then after that, there was a huge sort of counter movement because people wanted to go out and be decadent and meet each other because there was so much up-damped sadness and demand for we need to live. My argument right now is that the world is in a similar sad place. We're 100 years later on. We've been in lockdown for a year. There's COVID, there's pandemic all around the world. And so people are feeling sad. We're not in that euphoric moment yet because we're not out of the woods. Everyone hasn't been vaccinated. But the world is definitely sad. So if anything, we're seeing that people, they're in physical isolation. So they're looking for digital togetherness. So we're seeing a huge surge in what I would call comfort food, but comfort music. So uplifting, peaceful, inspirational, something that inspires hope. So it's not so much the decadent side of things. It's not so much the more hardcore dance party stuff. There's some of that as well, because people are reminiscing, remember when we went clubbing or remember when we went dancing. But I would argue it's more about creating music that puts you in a piece of, or in a state of mind which is hopeful, optimistic, and looking forward to hopefully what we'll define as the roaring 2020s once we've all been vaccinated and we go all decadent and go outside and we get to hang out with each other again.
Got you. We're going to take another break, get another word in for another one of our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Oskar Höglund, who is the co-founder and CEO of Epidemic Sound.
Hi, this is Bill Sinke coming live from Nashville, Tennessee. You're listening to the business side of music. I'm listening as well.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Are you curious about Gordon Lightfoot's songwriting process, or what it was like working with Prince in the 80s? Have you ever given any thought to what goes into a golf course design or writing a book? I'm Steve Waxman, the host of The Creationist, a podcast about people who create. Each episode features a different creator sharing stories that I hope will inspire your own creativity. The Creationist is available now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio with us today from Stockholm, Sweden, Oskar Höglund is co-founder and CEO of Epidemic Sound, which, from the conversation, if you've been listening this entire time, and we hope you have, is really a new means of getting music out there into various platforms. And oh yeah, if you are the creator of this content, guess what? You're making more money now than you could have possibly in the past because of this relationship that you have with Epidemic Sound. Let's say I'm an independent artist and I've got some music that I want to present to you. What is that process of getting it?
So we have a very skilled team working at Epidemic. There are more than 40 people. They're distributed all around the world, in particular, as I referred to before, in North America and in Northern Europe. But everyone from all corners of the world are welcome to apply. Easiest way of getting in touch with us is through epidemicsound.com. We have a number of artist pages where you can read up and understand more about our model, examples, what we're looking for. Spoiler alert, we're looking for everything. We're looking for diversity. And so you reach out and we interact with everyone who reaches out to us. Typically what we'll do is we'll ask you to send a sample. You can add notes in terms of, we don't want you to necessarily try stuff that you're not comfortable with. We want to hear what you're passionate about. If it's playing the harmonic, or if it's you do play a mean saw, or whatever it might be. So we want you to go with that. We're looking for difference. So we're not looking for people to adapt and try and send what they think might be hits. And so send that over to us, and then there would typically be a couple, 2 to 3 different interactions. We want to get to know you, and you get to know us, because we put a huge premium on the relationship that we have with artists, the relationship that we have and build with creators, because we take creativity very seriously. We understand that we're asking a lot from people when we're saying that we would like to work together with you and ultimately acquire tracks with you, from you. And getting to that point is not something that we take lightheartedly. It's something that we invest 10 years of our reputation, hundreds of millions of dollars throughout the years, and we've built something which we think is quite astounding. It's something that's very, very valuable for music creators. It's something that's very valuable for storytellers. And we like to think that we've built something that's great and that is going to play an important part in soundtracking the internet. But like I said, we see this as a partnership. So we invest very much. So we want to get to know you and you get to know us. If there's mutual interest there, that's when we start working together. That's when we say, okay, this is excellent. So here's a brief. This is what we're seeing happening. Given what you do, given what you're passionate about, and given the data signals we're seeing, there's this perfect overlap. It's almost like a matrix. This is what you know, and this is what you want to do, and this is what we would like to see happen. And we start working together. So you typically get handed a reviewer, somebody who can help you, and we work with people who are incredibly seasoned in terms of music, putting together, have different functions. So depending on what needs you have, areas that you want to explore a little bit more, where you might need some help, we have those skill sets. So obviously free of charge, we sort of supercharge you with information, tutorial ideas, feedback loops, anything to get you from good to great. And then that's how we would start to work. Normally there's something like 3 different feedback loops per track before everyone is super happy. And I think that whether or not the model works, you typically look at, do people stick around? And the overwhelming answer is yes. People normally never leave us. So we're not always acquiring tracks, but we're always expanding the family and sort of, encouraging people to collaborate with each other, collaborate with us in new ways, try their hand at new genres if they want to do that. And like I said before, it's a very wide church. Some people just want to do 1 track per year, 1 track per quarter. Some people stick within a specific genre always. Some people maybe only do top lines or only do a specific kind of instrument, but do that for multiple different genres or together with different people. And we're totally open to all of the above. We want to adapt ourselves to what different people bring to the table. And we've gotten to a scale where we're able to see that it works. I think the thing that we take the most serious maybe is our reputation. So we're super keen to make sure that people have good experiences when they interact with us. especially since we're talking about something as personal and as precious as creativity and intellectual property.
When they come to Epidemic Sound, is this an exclusivity, or is it non-exclusive? Can they go other places, or how does that work?
We fundamentally don't believe in exclusivity for one very clear reason. It's not in the best interest of artists. So we've seen firsthand, prior to starting Epidemic, how people have been tied in by contracts and they don't want to necessarily be there. We believe that if you are a creator, ultimately what you're looking to do is you have music within you, or you have creativity within you, and you want as many people as possible to hear what you have to say. And so we're saying that we love to work with people, but if you want to work with multiple other people, so you want to tour with someone else, or you want to do live gigs, which obviously today is difficult, but in general, if you have other projects, if you make stuff that you don't want to sell to us, you want to put that in a different context, or you want to save it for a rainy day, we think that's 100% your prerogative. And we want to be a force for good to say that locking people in and demanding exclusivity needs to go away. You should stick with your partner because you want to, not because you have to.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And once again, how can they find you?
Easiest is look us up at epidemicsound.com, and then we have a huge universe there where you just click artists and away we go.
Perfect. Oscar, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Bob. It was a pleasure.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.
still here? It's over. Go home. Go.